Okay, this video will give an introduction to our practice soldering kit, walk through the components and show you what to do with them. Not every kit will contain exactly the same things, but there should be a variety. This is an XLR jack. This is included so you can practice desoldering. What you would do is pull off the heat shrink tube and then use solder wick to try to suck the solder out of the cup in order to free the wire and clean out the cup so that you could solder fresh wires in place. You will receive a circuit board and then a bunch of components. So we include some wire so that you can practice trimming and stripping wire. You can strip the insulation off with a pair of side cutters. You can use a razor blade and score the insulation around the circumference and then pull off the insulation. Or the easiest way is to buy a proper wire stripping tool, in which case you would put the wire into one of the grooves. There are grooves here that correspond to different conductor diameters. You'd put the wire into the appropriate groove, squeeze it, and then pull the insulation off. Let's identify some components. So these things are all resistors. Sometimes they're loose, like this one. Sometimes they are on a tape strip. If you are removing resistors from a tape strip, what you don't want to do is pull the resistor apart like this. Instead, grip the lead nearest the tape you're removing and then pull the tape off that way. Resistors are not polarized. That means if you're installing a resistor into, for example, this pad here, you could do it this way or you could do it that way. It would work in either case, or rather in either orientation. Some resistors have stripes around the outside. The stripes are a color code that tells you what value and tolerance that resistor is. My kits tend to use Dale resistors that don't have stripes. Instead, they have printed value markings on them, which are very hard to see unless you have a magnifier, which I highly recommend. The resistors can be installed in any of the pads labeled R on the circuit board in the sample kit. Now let's talk about diodes. This kit has two different kinds of diodes. These are DO35 style. That refers to the diameter of the lead, the conductor here. This is a DO41. Typically, a diode like this would be found in a power supply. The DO41 is a very tight fit into the solder pads on this board. They do fit, but it's a tight fit. And again, typically you wouldn't end up using this in this kind of circuit. But these you would see. Now, the thing to remember about diodes is that they are polarized. Both of these styles show a stripe at one end, and that stripe has to correspond to the stripe on the footprint on the circuit board. So the stripe indicates the cathode end. The other end is called the anode, and you would line it up so the stripe on the component sits on top of the stripe on the circuit board. Next, we have some capacitors. Now, capacitors can look like a lot of different things. These are all capacitors. You won't get all of these in your kit, but these are all different kinds of capacitors. So there's quite a variety of things that you might see. These are mica. This is an old film capacitor. Whoops, sorry, not a capacitor. This is a box film type. That's a ceramic capacitor. This is an electrolytic, and these are disc capacitors. So the box film is the easiest to deal with. You could install this at C17 or 18 right in the middle of the board. That's very easy. The ceramic capacitors or disc capacitors here are not something you would typically see in one of my kits, but you might see them in some components. They can be installed at any of the C locations. They don't fit very well, and I did that intentionally. The idea here is to give you some experience in forming leads. So you'll see this can be just plugged in and soldered down if you wanted. You could do it that way. It's not sitting flat. So my thinking was that you could rebend these leads, straighten this lead out, and then bend it so these two are closer together, and that way the capacitor would sit better down on top of the board. The electrolytic capacitor is polarized. The negative leg is marked with a stripe on the body. The positive leg is longer. If you've already cut it off the tape, then you don't know which leg used to be longer, so you can look at the stripe on the body. This would go into one of the round capacitor locations on the circuit board, and the positive lead is marked with a plus sign. Finally, let's talk about transistors. There are two transistors in this kit. These are a package called TO92. It's a three-legged transistor. This one is taped. you probably would not want to pull the tape off while gripping the head because you might pull the legs out of the body. Instead, what you should do is either peel the tape back or cut this off at the tape. And this transistor would be very easy to install at T4 because T4 has pin spacing that matches this particular part. I included this part because the leads are not already formed. You can install this at T1 and T2 down here, but first you need to form the middle lead. What that means is, if you can see this on the board, the middle leg is behind the other two. You should also notice that this part is polarized. It has sort of a half circle shape, so there's a flat face and then a round backside, and that corresponds to the ink drawing on the circuit board. What you would do is take this part, grip the middle leg with a pair of needle nose pliers, bend it backwards, like so, at about, 30 or 40 degrees, and then grip it a little bit further down, maybe 2 millimeters further down, and bend it forward again, like this. Now I've done a bad job because I can't see what I'm doing, but you get the idea. That's how you can form the leads, and then you would line up the outline of the part with the outline on the silkscreen and put that into the circuit board. Now, I would also refer you to all of the videos on the MicParts website. There's a video tutorial series on the S25 and ETL1 circuit kit that goes into more detail about lead forming, diode orientation, and so on and so forth.